Have you heard? KushCon is headed to Tampa this August 6th and 7th. Network with more than 7,500 hemp and cannabis professionals, sample products from more than 300 brands, and take in over 70 educational sessions. Do you work in cannabis or hemp? KushCon Tampa is the only place you can meet directly with the nation's largest distributors and retailers. Get tickets and learn more at kush.com/KushCon. Plus, listeners of this show can save 50% on tickets with the promo code PODCAST. Again, that's kush.com/KushCon. See you there.
My dog has no nose.
Your dog has no nose. How does he smell?
Bloomin' awful.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Deadhead Cannabis Show. I'm Larry Mishkin with Mishkin Law in Chicago. I'm joined again today by my co-host, Rob Hunt of Lene Holdings out in San Diego, and our producer, Dan Humiston, as always. Rob, that's a great line to start off. Give us the background.
Well, obviously, that's a joke that I think was told many times when the Grateful Dead had moments where they didn't know what else to do with themselves, and it became an ongoing joke. That usually, I think Phil Lesh was the one that told it, or Bobby would tell it. But that was from June 6, 1970, from the Fillmore West, and it was right after Garcia had broken a string in Donese. They had about 3 minutes to kill before they started playing another tune, and somehow the old "My Dog Has No Nose" joke came out. But that one was you could actually hear the audience laughing, so it was well received that night.
And groaning maybe even a little bit too, but you know it's funny because having just come off the 2-month remembrance of the 50th anniversary of Europe '72, quite a few times on that tour, Bobby took time to tell the story about the yellow dog, or the yellow ugly yellow dog with no tail. That's a great one too. Although that one takes about 4 or 5 minutes for him to spit out, and depending on what frame of mind he's in, he doesn't always get through it cleanly.
No, and I think this, you get some recurring themes over the years, and there aren't too many of them that they stuck with. But the yellow dog and the "My Dog Has No Nose" were two of the classics. And then obviously when they would try to kill some time, "Funicula Funiculi" came out quite a few times as well as a good way, or the beer barrel polka.
Yep. Well, good. That's a great way to kick off the show we're going to be featuring today from 1970, Fillmore West, June 6th. That was a favorite time of year for the Dead to be playing in San Francisco. They played there in '69. They played there in '70 on the 6th. But we went with this one. It's just a great, solid show all the way around. A lot of great tunes on it, and we'll have a lot of fun with it today. For our listeners, it's a special treat for you guys today. You just get Rob and me, and you get to hear our musings on all things marijuana, on all things related to this Dead show, and a lot of other great things that are going on out there right now. What's first on our list here today, Rob?
Well, maybe we should just start it off by saying that it's actually refreshing once in a while, Larry, where it is just you and I, but coming off of 4 or 5 weeks of just amazing guests like Lynette Shaw and Stacey Smith and David Ellison and having Todd on last week. Yeah, I mean, we've had some terrific guests. So, shout out to all those guys for being, guests on the show and taking your time out of your day to speak with us. That sometimes we forget that, we have a show just without guests once in a while. But I can tell you, it sure is fun when we have people that have such a wide breadth of talent that, come on in history in the space. So it's been really, really fun the last, 4 or 5 weeks for me personally. I've loved doing the show when we've had so many fun people to talk to.
Yeah. I agree with that, Rob. And, we've talked over the years about the quality of guests that we can get in the door. And although we think very highly of every guest we get in the door, certainly some wind up getting more interest from our listeners than others. And for a long time, we were really focusing on the music side and coming up with some really great music guests. And it's nice to be able to really move back for a little while and focus on the marijuana side. We're in the process right now. I know we talked about before the show today of trying to line up 3 or 4 more people in the marijuana space who have played a pretty big role or might otherwise be identifiable to our listeners. And we look forward to being able to bring them that as well, while still finding time to work in comments about our favorite music band.
Yeah, no doubt. So yeah, maybe today we kick it off with a little bit of cannabis news. And Did you see that Massachusetts is now reporting that since they started adult use in 2018, they've now crossed the $3 billion threshold in total sales, which is pretty meaningful for a state the size of Mass.
I would say that that's very true, and it's great to see, Rob. We're at a point in this industry now where the states are succeeding. Now, as much as we like to try to avoid talking about these kind of things on the show, it's not insignificant that in the last 2 days, two more of Donald Trump's supposed targets have both been vindicated. The Durham trial, and then the other one where they were looking into something else that I just saw, right? But it's hard for people who follow that to believe that this is what's really happening. Well, guess what? There was a lot of people who told us that the legal marijuana market might not ever succeed, might not be good, would never succeed in Massachusetts. Massachusetts trotted out its program initially with some hiccups, but now, Massachusetts has become another shining example of where this industry has arrived at in the United States. And I think it's a nice message to the naysayers out there that be quiet, get back in your lane, and let those of us that know how to have a good time do our thing.
Yeah, it's not for a lack of trying though by some of the people to thwart the industry. If you watch Laura Ingraham, she was on the air I think yesterday talking about the fact that with the Uvalde shooters, how come we're not looking into to mental health that's associated with cannabis psychosis. And I looked at that going, this is absolutely nuts. Cannabis psychosis leading to violent behavior is something that we've never seen any correlation from anywhere. And the thing that I found disappointing about it is a lot of people that were clowning her on social media were also clowning the cannabis industry in the process. And the prime example would be Michael Steele, who was formerly the head of the GOP.
Yep.
Coming out calling her out on the nonsense, but saying look, it's a bunch of lazy, stoned, hungry, munchy cannabis hippies that are doing this. Like, come on, Laura. Instead of saying look, there's just zero chance that there's a correlation there, and there's tens of millions of people that smoke cannabis. And the likelihood of psychosis is far greater with alcohol or significant, many other drugs than is with cannabis. It should have just been a straight, draw a line in the sand and say that that's nonsense instead of pushing on these passe stereotypes in the process.
But look, we know that's the case, right? Don't forget what now deceased Medal of Honor winner Rush Limbaugh said when Jerry Garcia died, right? It's just one less, drug dealing hippie out there or whatever it was. And, it's an attitude that I've never really understood, and maybe it goes back to Vietnam and the idea that the hippies were the war protesters and not supporting their country or something. But, for a guy who had gotten busted carrying huge amounts of, Viagra and stuff across the border, I just don't see the need to vilify people who do this. And especially, you have to wonder because, look, I have no idea about Laura Ingraham, but we know that one night they caught Sean Hannity vaping when they cut back from commercial. And, if you're going to tell me that none of those people at Fox News get high, I'm going to tell you, I don't believe you. So, that to me is the saddest part, that if you can't acknowledge where this is at these days and you still have to try. But don't forget, and from Laura Ingraham's perspective, her group, they're trying to find any excuse they can for who this shooter is in, Texas, other than, just some disgruntled guy who, because of today's laws, was able to get his hands on guns and go in and shoot down a bunch of kids. So right first he was a trans woman, and the trans woman they found started having trouble. Now she's going to blame it on, cannabis psychosis. And, you and I both know that some parent somewhere is going to stand up and object to it coming into their town. Well, Laura Ingraham says it causes cannabis psychosis.
Right. Yeah. And to your point, though, with Rush Limbaugh, what I'll say in response is, Rush Limbaugh said that in 1995, and that's only 22 years after the war on drugs began under Nixon, right? From 73 to 95 is a 22-year period. We've now had a longer period than that since he said that. Prop 215 wasn't even passed when Rush said that. So when Rush got away with saying that, it was politically popular for him to poke shots at drug users or cannabis users. Nowadays, it surprised me that someone like Laura Ingraham or anyone else on any network would be able to take that pot shot simply because they don't have the political support. They don't have the support of even their own audience doesn't necessarily agree with that. If you don't think that you say Fox News host, I don't think anyone that watches the network. If you were to say split it down, percentage of people that smoke on both sides of the aisle, I think you'd find that it's pretty evenly split. I know tons and tons of people that are GOP and tons of people that are Dems that are both cannabis users. So the idea of trying to cast aspersions against a specific subset of the population, a pretty large subset of the population, and attribute that to anything with zero evidence behind it, and flash a chyron that actually says, like evidence suggests that, that's where I take issue with it. It's just, as you said, it's pure deflection, and it's political deflection.
But that's Fox's MO every single night. I mean, that's what they do every single night. That's what their game is, right? They grab a headline. Did you see the other night, Tucker? And I'm sorry, we're really drifting off topic here, but Tucker Carlson was upset because the Korean pop singers were at the White House, and he started slamming that all night. So, the problem with this is it starts to cross over from politics, and the war on the right becomes cultural, as we've seen. And, how far they're going to try to take that culture war is anybody's best guess. But, anybody out there who doesn't think that, these same people might not wake up one day and decide that marijuana is from the devil as well, and we got to get rid of this. And all of a sudden, you got Clarence Thomas writing an opinion and his wife bragging about it before it gets published. That could happen.
That could happen. Well, lots of scary things that have happened over the last couple of weeks. And again, without trying to be political on this show, we really try not to be. I've got a lot of hope for better days ahead. So let's hope we see some.
I agree with that, Robin. And here's what I would say about that. When I'm, looking at that time and with those kind of better days ahead, is there any place really better to go and do it than down in New Orleans?
That's a great question. I missed Jazz Fest this year. I'm sorry I did. I know there's actually a new Jazz Fest film coming out, but New Orleans remains one of my favorite towns. And for the Grateful Dead, may have not been one of their favorite towns based on the bust, but for a brief period there, they did cover the song New Orleans, and I think we might have a clip of it.
Well, come on, take a stroll down on Basin Street. Well, now I listen to the music of the Dixieland beat. The magnolia blossoms are through the air. And you ain't been to heaven if you ain't been there. They got the French bones hanging from the big tree. Down the Mississippi, down to New Orleans. I said, hey.
So, Larry, I think you know a bit of history about that song. You want to share that?
That's a great tune. And, I desperately want to get Bob Weir on the show one day, and I want to play that song, and I want to say, Bob, that's amazing. Where did it go? What a fun tune for them to play. It's jumpy. It's got a great beat. Clearly they were having a good time with it. And, it's one of those tunes that's been around for a long, long time. I think for a lot of us, it really kind of came back into our conscience when John Fogerty released a live cut of it in 2014 on the Dr. John tribute show album that they all put together, celebration of Dr. John and his music. And that got a lot of playtime. But it's really a song that dates back, I think, about 20 years before that. Just the two guys who wrote it, Frank Guida and Joseph Royster. And I believe it was first recorded by U.S. Bonds sometime in the 1960s. And it was always out there. But it's a tune that's been not always covered by rock bands. Sometimes jazz bands or more contemporary music bands can play it. And, the fact that the Dead just jump into it and grab it and run with it like that. And I think we saw when we were looking at this, that this was maybe only one of 4 times that the Dead ever played it. And, none since a long time ago. And it's a great tune. It's just one of those things when you step in and one day that boom, their repertoire gets expanded by another song and you're like, love it.
The thing I love about that song is it's got such good audience participation, really similar to the way the song "Shout" does. Mm-hmm. Where it's they can do the hey yeahs and then have it come right back, and that's one of those things that the Grateful Dead didn't do too much of. They did a bit with Not Fade Away. They did it a bit with Garcia would do it with Shining Star, but there wasn't too much of it where it would be a call and repeat kind of situation, and they definitely had it. Ico for sure. But there's very, very few where they sing, and Fish has it with Wilson, right? And has it with Harry Hood and a couple other times, but Widespread has it with Chilly Water, certain things where it's the call and response, but I love that. As an audience member, you're stoked when they play a song like that because you actually get to feel like you're part of the song, right? It gets you
Yep.
Even Stash, just knowing how to hit the claps,
Right, the clapping, right. At that crazy rhythm. I love that. I finally figured that one out. I was like, oh, this is the clapping song. Okay.
Yeah, so it's all sorts of different things where you just have to know, kind of like you feel like you're in the know with the song if you get the call and repeat, done properly. And so I was really surprised to see this one go out of the repertoire because, as you said, it's just such a fun song.
It is a fun song, and that's what always made them great. Was you just, like you say, funiculi, which the first time I heard that, I think it's on Dick's Picks 3 is the intro going into the show, and and it's a melody that we've all heard in our lives 100 times, but you never necessarily know who to attribute it to or anything. But the Dead loved it, picked up on it, and boom, just would introduce it into the downtime every now and then when they were looking for a way to kill time when somebody's string broke or whatever. And I have to say that, your standard bands like, Journey didn't do that kind of thing very often, right? They just have a set list and boy, they stick with it and it's their top 20s. And if you like Journey, it's great. And if you don't, then don't go. But, this is just the spontaneity that, I think drove all of us to Grateful Dead shows. What are they going to do tonight that's going to be different?
Agreed. And that's, anytime a band has got that, and I don't care who the band is, that, if they can get me excited because I know that whatever I'm going to go see is different than what I saw last night, or completely different. I just have a tremendous amount of respect for musicians that have that ability. And even some of my favorite musicians out there, Paul Simon, for instance, I've seen him a bunch of times. His tour would be whatever he wanted to play on that tour. He might have 2 or 3 songs they'd switch in and out. Like Jimmy Buffett, same thing. Like Jimmy, for sure you're getting, I think there's 12 songs he plays every concert. And, he'll work in an additional, 8 or 10, but for sure he's, doing the following. And, very likely he's going to, encore with one particular harbor and he's going to say Volcano to the end. Like there's all sorts of things that you kind of come to expect it. Like the Allman Brothers would open almost every single show with Melissa into Blue Sky. It was almost guaranteed that Whipping Post would be the encore. So it's I get the formulaic side of being a musician, but I much prefer sort of the jazz nature of bands that say, let's just switch it up and come out and play something different every night.
Well, for sure. And, even with formulaic nature, I don't mean to be a killjoy when I say it, but certainly, easily within the last 5 to 7 years of the Grateful Dead, it got to the point where they were pretty formulaic, and it wasn't uncommon for me to be sitting in a show and turn to somebody and say, you know what, Out of Space, they're going into the other one, into this, into that, into Sugar Mag and boom, and they would play it. And they turned to me and say, how do you know? And I'm like, because I've gone to too many of these, or you were reading the set lists and tracking what they had been playing at the other shows. So you're like, oh, I know where they're going with this. And that show we were talking about last week, the Las Vegas show with Steve Miller that night, 3 songs into the second set, one of my buddies there turned to me and laid out the entire rest of the show all the way through the encore. And he was spot on. And it was just amazing, that we were like, how did he know they were going to play
I hope that guy bet huge that night in Vegas. I hope he hit the tables harder than he's ever hit the tables before. It's like, I got it tonight. It's my night.
But, sometimes similarly, they were good at throwing you a curve like we talked about a few shows ago when they came out one night and opened the whole show with Scarlet Fire, or they do things like that. But still, this kind of stuff where just a tune out of nowhere is just...
Do you want to hear something crazy? I went back and checked my Grateful Dead stats because I'm still such a nerd that I still keep the book of all my stats. Almost half the Scarlet Fires I ever saw were not to open the second set, which blew me away. I figured there'd be 1 or 2, but I saw 3 victim Scarlet Fires. I saw a touch Scarlet Fire. I saw a Scarlet Women, and I also saw something else. Remember I told you my first one was a Scarlet Estimated, and then I saw, I guess, a Women Fire. I didn't realize I'd seen 2 where they'd broken up the Scarlet and the Fire. I thought I'd only seen the one where they broke it up. But there was multiple times where, 6 or 7 shows where I saw something else, like an Ico Scarlet Fire to open the second set, which blew me away because I only think of Scarlet Fire. In my mind, I only picture it as a second set opener.
Right. No, and they definitely hit a period, I think, in the late 80s and early 90s where they started to get clever with that. But what was always I never saw them break up China Rider like that. And I know that I don't want to say I ever saw him break up Help Slip Frank, but for a while Help Slip were retired and they would just play Franklin's. Yep. But
Feel Like a Stranger Franklin's.
But yeah, or Half Step Franklin's, that kind of love that stuff. And yeah, always great. But look, it's a fun tune. It's fun to play. And, if you were there that night, lucky to be in the crowd, you went home and had a story to tell.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Other cannabis news. Do you see the new stats coming out about where kids are these days? Alcohol versus cannabis.
Okay, so I just have to say that this is like one of the best stories that I've seen in a long time, and let me just say for the record and give a shout out to our good buddy Mark Thomas, the longtime owner of the classic head shop in Chicago, the Alley, and Mark was kind enough to share a story with me the other day about how social lubricant is no longer a liquid. It's in a magazine. It's in the Bloomberg magazine, actually, and it was written by Tiffany Carey. So we'll give a shout out to her, too. But it's saying now that of people aged 18 to 24, 69% prefer marijuana to alcohol. Now, admittedly, that's a bit of a difficult statistic because some of that age group is under the age of 21 and therefore both too young for alcohol and marijuana. But since they're too young for both of them, I think it still makes it a fair comparison. And this is amazing, right? This is just amazing. When I was growing up, there were definitely kids smoking marijuana, but everybody was drinking. That was the big thing to do. And today, there still are groups of kids I know that out there that prefer drinking to marijuana. But it's just wonderful to see that so many more people in that age group are turning to marijuana. And this, let me just say this for the record, right? Nobody here and nobody in the industry and nobody anywhere is advocating underage use of marijuana. But we also have to be, realistic enough to recognize that people under the age of 21 do choose intoxicants of one kind or another. And, I've always said to my boys, if you're going to choose, I'd prefer you choose marijuana. And I tell that to anyone who will listen, who doesn't get mad at me if their parents yell at me. Just look at the numbers every year of how many teenagers die from alcohol deaths, high school football parties, fraternity initiations, fraternity dances. Sometimes it's the guy, sometimes it's the girl who they pour too many shots down. Alcohol kills. Marijuana doesn't. It's kind of a simple equation for me. And if we accept the fact that even the kids younger than 21 are going to try something, I think it's great to see that they're moving to marijuana and away from alcohol.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, again, I'll preface this as well by saying that I don't advocate for teen use of any intoxicant, but realistically, kids go to college and there's going to be people that are buying them things. And I think a lot of the reason that we went from an 18-year-old drinking age to a 21-year-old was not to make sure that 18 and 19-year-olds weren't drinking, was to make sure that 16 and 17-year-olds weren't drinking. It's like, look, if you're going to kind of fudge the numbers a little bit and say we expect there's going to be a certain amount of diversion away from the legal age to the people younger, let's at least make sure it doesn't divert past a certain sort of threshold age. And I think that age is college, right? So, there's no way that you can think that there's any college kid in America right now, unless you're going to like Liberty University, that isn't out there drinking, right?
Brigham Young.
Yeah, exactly. Rick's College in Idaho, now Brigham Young North. Yeah, any of those kids, in any other school is drinking and is probably using cannabis. So realistically, the school knows about it. They're certainly not turning a blind eye. Everyone knows there's fraternity parties and house parties that are involving intoxicants. The police all know about it, but we have an acceptable level of tolerance for that from law enforcement and from educators. And say we're okay with that. What we're not okay with is high school kids, right? And I don't think that means I'm saying all right, 19-year-olds go out and break the law. What I'm saying is it's going to happen, and we have to be realistic. It's going to happen. And your point, if you're going to a college party, do I think I'd rather see people smoking a bowl or hitting a vape pen versus getting hammered? I definitely would.
Well, not just even ODs. What about, we keep reading over the weekend, all of these holiday parties everywhere where people pull out guns and start shooting. And it always says liquor was being served. They were getting drunk on liquor. People don't get violent necessarily when they get high. People get violent when they get drunk. So again, if you're going to be in a fraternity house, on a Saturday after a football game and half the kids in there went to the other school, if everybody's getting stoned, I think, it's a lot more peaceful than if everybody's getting drunk. That's just my spin on it.
Reminds me of a Widespread Panic song called Greta, where it's, the rivalry between Georgia and Georgia Tech. And that ends up, the chorus is, Greta's got a gun. She ain't no flower child, so it's the whole idea of, you get those people in a room together and fights will break out. And that's usually alcohol related.
It is, and it just has to move to cannabis. But, we can talk about that younger group, but think about this for a minute. This goes up to 24. So this includes kids ages 21 to 24. Now, when I turned 21, if you didn't immediately start going out to the bars and drinking, right? It was like if you didn't get a license the day you turned 16, everybody wondered what the hell was wrong with you. 21 to 24 were big drinking years in my life because I just happened to have easy access. I was legal and I could get to bars, and I didn't have as much access to marijuana. There were no dispensaries or anything like that. Even at that age, I still had to look around to find it from black market sources. And today, while it's easier for people to get marijuana, I acknowledge, it's painfully easy to get alcohol. And if you have people who are now of legal drinking age saying that, hey, now that I'm 21, that's great, but I'd rather smoke. That's huge for marijuana. And, something that the alcohol industry is going to look at, which is why, as we've talked about plenty, we have all these alcohol makers who are now looking to come out with their own THC line of THC infused beverages.
Yeah. We've obviously looked at this from the perspective of what this article said, but I can tell you even from the perspective of just anecdotally what I see, anyone that has been anywhere within a distance of seeing me in the last month has been offered cannabis products recently. Like I've just been like the candy man around Carlsbad, California. In the last couple of weeks, I've been handing out edibles like crazy. And like I usually bring a couple and offer them to like someone I know that likes edibles, and everyone else will be out like within earshots, like, oh, can I get one of those too? So I was at a birthday party the other night, and there was 8 of us for dinner, and I wish I'd had twice as many because everyone's like, oh, I'll take one. And that's like everyone calling me afterwards, like, dude, that edible's great. But same thing with, I was at another birthday party the Friday before, same thing. The workman that's installing the built-in cabinet in my living room right now, same thing. Like just the acceptance of people that are looking for other form factors and saying and telling me I'd much rather, take an edible before bed than have a cocktail or, a drink to wind down the day. I'm amazed at how many people that I would have never expected. They're like, I'll take one of those.
All day long. And it's funny you mentioned that because back in the day when I first moved into an apartment, then the game was when they came to hook up your cable, if you wanted the movie channels, you had to give them a 6-pack of beer, right? Now you can give those same guys a couple of joints and they're just as happy to set you up on all the movie channels. And if they like your weed, they'll make sure you stay on the movie channels and come by once every few weeks.
Yeah, note to everyone that's listening out there, in states where you're legally allowed to give cannabis away, is a great way to tip your bartender. It is a great way to tip the valet. It's a great way to do all sorts of things to keep you in the good graces of the people you interact with. Like I tip my mechanics. I tip everyone in weed these days. Just, hey man, here's some pre-rolls. Here's some edibles. Here's a vape pen. It's just a great way. And oftentimes it's like, hey, try this one out and tell me what you think about it. And I, pass it back on to, anecdotally the people that are the manufacturers of the product. So it's super fun for me to kind of be able to just go out there and, keep everyone happy by just passing out weed the same way I would with, a bottle of wine or a bottle of scotch or something like that. So I'd much rather do it with cannabis. And by the way, because of what the industry we're in, they kind of expect it. Like, hey, aren't you the cannabis guy? Don't you do anything? I'm like, yeah, of course. Here you go.
But years ago, before I started law school, 30 plus years ago, I was in New York for a wedding, and my cousin was getting married out on Long Island, and we had all gone into the city that day, and I had stayed with some friends, and I was taking a cab back out, and halfway back out to Long Island, wherever we were staying, cab driver's talking to me. He goes, so you have a good time in the city? Yeah. You walking around? Yeah. He goes, you buy any weed? I was like, well, as a matter of fact, we did pick up a little marijuana in Washington Square Park. He goes, you got any with you? I said, well, yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. He goes, you want to smoke it? I'd never smoked with a cab driver before, but the cab driver and I lit up. We passed the pipe back and forth through the little slot that you used to push the money through. And then when he dropped me off at the hotel, I had a little baggie with like 3 or 4 more buds. I just stuck it through the slot. He's like, oh, dude, you're the best. You need a ride to the airport tomorrow? Just give me a call.
So, Larry, I did that one time on my cabbie, I want to say in the New Year's Eve of 1997-98 in Salt Lake City, Utah. And our cabbie was like, hey, man, like, mind if I come in and smoke a joint with you guys? We're like, yeah, come on in. Well, January 1st, I go upstairs and my cabbie's still there. and this is the same cabbie that as he's driving us home, there's a bottle of booze rolling around in the back. And I was like, hey, man, like, I think one of your last rides left a bottle of booze. He goes, oh, no, that's mine. I was like, yours? You're the designated driver. He's like, dude, I'm the cabbie. No one's looking for me. I was like, okay.
That's awesome.
So sometimes you have to be careful. Sometimes you have to be careful about offering the cabbie to come in, or they might still be there the next day. You'll never be caught needing to replenish your stash again when you subscribe to Hemper's monthly smoking boxes. Hemper is hands down the best place to stock up on your smoking supplies, no matter the occasion. Curated with innovative and hand-selected products to ensure you're getting the absolute highest quality accessories for your smoking experience. Hemper's monthly subscription service provides $100+ in value for only $40. There's also the convenient option to receive one every month, 3 months, 6 months, or yearly. Right now, use promo code DEADHEAD10 to get started and receive 10% off a Hemper box or the XL box at hemper.com.
I understand how that could work. Absolutely, that's always going to be a little bit tricky. But you're right. That just is the beauty of it. And I think that what's fun for a lot of us, right, is that those of us who know that marijuana has a currency can transact in that currency, and it's always fun because you're kind of part of the the guy who's taking it, and then the guy who's stuck waiting behind you because he wasn't smart enough to give somebody a joint is sitting there mumbling, tried to give him $20, why wouldn't he take it? Well, they don't want $20, they want a joint.
There you go. Well, speaking of fun things, going back to that June 6th show,
yes,
there's another tune that those guys, the boys, didn't play all that often, and it's one that usually would only happen again when a string broke or some other issue happened. And this actually is from that same stage banter, portion that we were listening to earlier. But I don't know if you ever caught one. There was a couple in the late 80s, and I think one or two even, I think in 1990, but the Frozen Lager song. Did you ever catch one?
I do not recall. I don't think I did.
I know I've heard a couple on tape. I want to say from '88 that they played it. I want to say there's one from Brendan Bernarina in Jersey, but I know there's at least one or two from '85. But the first one I can remember hearing, I've got check stats, is this one from June 6, 1970. And again, it was coming out of the Don't Ease Me In, where Jerry's like, "Hey, I broke a string." So Bobby decides to try to see if he can recreate a song that he remembered from his youth. So maybe pull up a clip of that because it is a fun one.
Sure.
But not like none today. If you'd pour whiskey on it, he'd eat a bale of hay. That's all I can remember.
I don't know what's more funny about that. The song he's playing or his, kind of offhanded comment at the end, right? It's like, well, that's all I can do, I guess.
It's absolutely terrible, but it's hilarious.
Of course, that's the beauty of it. I think it would shock any of us if he sat down and played, concert level acoustic guitar with great vocals. Bobby just dives right into it and, doesn't remember if he knows the words and just plays a few chords that he knows and sings as far as he can go and then says, "Okay, I'm done."
Yeah, that's it reminds me a lot of not quite as well done, but when Garcia remembered Whiskey in the Jar after years and decided to try it out when he was just messing around, and that ended up making it onto what was it, the Pure Jerry or whatever, the So Many Roads?
Yeah, what was that very first one? They came out with the So Many Roads, the 5-disc. It was one of the first box sets they came out with, and it was right at the very end. It was on the last, the second to last song on the last disc. And it was fun to hear Jerry play it. Prior to that time, I didn't really have a recollection of hearing it, although now, bands such as Aerosmith have even covered it. But
Metallica actually made it really big for a while, but this predated Metallica's release of it. So I was actually pretty blown away after, I got to know the song and really started to love the song. And all of a sudden here comes Metallica, playing Whiskey in the Jar with a much, much different style. But,
much harder.
Definitely much harder, but still very cool. I can give them props for covering that tune the way they did.
Oh, I agree. If they want to go out and try and tackle a tune like that, it's the same kind of thing. It's just bringing a little element of, surprise to their concerts. And, I think that, a staged act can be a good thing if you're going to see something specific. But I think that any band out there, would be well served by somewhere in the middle of their show, just even for 10 minutes somewhere, a little extended guitar solo, anything, right? Just, that's what music fans are always looking for. We want, yes, it's nice to hear all the songs, but we want to make sure that we're Chicago and not Detroit.
Yeah, look, if Perry Farrell and Jane's Addiction can cover Ripple, and if Sublime can cover Scarlet, then there's no reason Metallica can't cover Whiskey in the Jar.
That I love every time I go back and I listen to that version of Ripple. It's just outstanding. It's 180 degrees from the tune and the images that you get when you're hearing Jerry Garcia play it, and I just love it. It's just they do such a great job with it.
I couldn't stand it when it first came out because like I was so centric onto the way that it had been drafted, initially and the way it had been played. But over time, when I started, realizing that musicians can do whatever the hell they want with a song, I've liked it more and more and more as I've gotten older, just because it is so far out of the comfort zone and such a different take on such a great song.
Yep. I agree. So when we were talking with Todd McCormick last week, one of the things that came up, was a discussion of the role that the MSOs and the large guys will play, in the marijuana industry eventually. And part of this, has been, I think seen by people as possibly, potentially maybe being a negative if it crushes the ability for other, smaller mom and pops to come up, and if it gives us too much commonality in the market and stuff like that. But I guess, there's a flip side to the MSOs too, right? Which is eventually they're large enough and, they've got the financial means and potentially the political connections to try and change some of the rules. And in fact, a story that you and I were taking a look at was that they're now, the MSOs are mobilizing to go after the feds on 280E.
Well, they're trying. We've certainly seen it before with smaller organizations. Harborside tried for years and ultimately failed, pretty miserably. But they're coming after it with a very new approach, and it's being led by the CEO of Ascend, Abner Curtin, who has now circled up some other people and said, "Hey, let's fight this thing. And by the way, if we actually win this thing, then every dollar we've paid into 280E is refundable to us." So, on behalf of the entire industry, there's a huge motivation for the feds not to lose this one, for fear that they're going to have to pay back hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that have been taken from the cannabis industry.
Well, I heard somebody say that, and I guess even as a lawyer, I'm a little bit confused about that, right? Because if you say, anytime you change the law, if you don't specify that it's just going to be now the law going forward or whatever it might be, now the government, well, that's certainly an issue they're going to have to face. And, although I can't give you an exact total of the dollars that have been lost to 280 over the years, I'm sure you and I, could probably come up with some very large numbers that would probably be well within the ballpark. That would just be, that would be amazing if that happened. And it would be interesting, right? Because then you would have a court actually ruling and saying that 280E is not lawful, as opposed to, what if they just declare, okay, marijuana is legal, so from this point forward, 280E no longer applies?
Yeah, look, I think it would be a smarter thing for the feds. But to your point on 280E, like the whole disgorgement of prior taxes paid, I think is a really difficult proposition because if you think about objectively, every cannabis company has raised their prices across the counter specifically to try to account for 280E, which means they've paid more 280E taxes as a result. If they didn't have 280E, then it would be significantly less expensive to the consumer, which would generate less in tax if that was the case. So it's already artificially inflated, where people are trying to put profits up large enough to cover their 280E exposure, right? So if I were the feds, even if I were losing this case, I'd certainly be saying, look, maybe we'll pay back some of it, but either way, we are entitled to something, and really, it's the consumer that's lost throughout this entire process. Look, I don't think it's all that likely that these guys succeed, but in this specific case, the reason I find this one interesting is this isn't, Ascend going at it by themselves. It's Ascend going out there and talking to all their other buddies that are well capitalized and saying, hey, if we each chip in a little bit of this, ultimately it's to the benefit of all of us, and ultimately it's to the benefit of the industry. So, is it worth our while to create a fund that, fights this thing with every single dollar and every single bit of artillery we have? And it probably is. So, Abner's an interesting character. I don't know if you've ever run across him, but, he's one of the bigger personalities in the space, and not always right, but, certainly very confident. So, we'll see. This might be a classic example of, not always right, but never in doubt. But we'll see how it goes. But, I think we follow this one. But in the meantime, we're getting killed out there, man. The feds are murdering us. So it's just, one after the other of just, tax after tax after tax. And, California's seen it. The MSOs have seen it. There's been studies done recently of who can actually, handle their tax liability, who can handle their debt load. And it all comes back to 280E. So, feds, don't murder us, man.
Very nice. And is that not the perfect lead-in, Dan? Thank you for our next clip from the show.
while the boys sing round the fire. Don't murder me.
The Black and Bloody Mire, that says it all, right? 280E, man. What a mess.
It is the thing that holds down this industry more than anything else, and it's the thing that the feds are most reticent to let go of. If there's one thing that lets the federal government tolerate this industry the way they have with this experiment, is behind closed doors they're laughing at us, going, well, they're suckers enough to keep starting these businesses. We'll keep taking all their money. And they have for 20 years now.
Yes, they have. And so, not unlike Steve D'Angelo back in the day, right? When he stuck his finger out to the feds and said, come sue me. It's nice to see that that this group of MSOs are, taking advantage of their size and the money that they've made from, consumers in the industry, to go out and try and change laws that, are potentially holding back the industry. So hats off to them. But, hats off to Jerry on Dire Wolf too, right? What a great tune. What a great song in their repertoire forever. It goes way back to the very beginning, and, they were still playing it occasionally all the way through to the end. And one of the things that I always found fascinating about it was there's some very, very early versions of it where Bobby is singing the lyrics.
Yeah, really early versions of it. But by 1970, it was pretty firmly in Garcia's camp. And one of the things I love about this show, and I love about this Dire Wolf in particular, is you can hear Billy's drumming so cleanly, and he's playing on a really small set of drums. It's just like a jazz trap setup that he's playing, but it's really, really crisp, and you can hear the tom tom and the snare really well throughout the entire show. So and Garcia's playing, it's obviously predating any of his Steve Irwin guitars. So it's that really twangy sound that he's got on what I think is a Fender Stratocaster, and it's just it's really fun because it's a much different sound than you're used to. But, some of the 1968, 69 shows were getting pretty far out there with distortion. The 1970s started bringing it back around to a much cleaner sound. And that Dire Wolf is kind of crisp note for note Garcia.
I agree. And I like what you said about Kreutzmann and his drum kit, because look, there's no doubt by the time I started seeing them, they had the circle of drums over their head, and then eventually the wall of drums behind them. And look, there's no denying the unique benefits that both Bill and Mickey bring to the band, and how much fun their drum solos could be. Especially if you were in the right frame of mind, and just how really they could work their way into just about any part of a song at any time, and the band would love it. But having said that, I would be lying if I didn't say that I really enjoyed that period of one drummer, and I really enjoyed it with a much less emphasis on drums. I mean, he's clearly playing the drums, and yes, we know that every time they were going to go into the other one, he'd have a 2 or 3 minute drum solo. But you're right; it's very crisp. There's not a lot of additional sound to it. He's just hitting, the drums in front of him and the cymbals, and I just think it shows what an exceptionally talented drummer Bill Kreutzmann is, just from a basic skills perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And sometimes I'm not one of those people that needs to hear Neil Peart every time. I'm just as happy to hear a Jack DeJohnette that is going to play a very, very simple, clean, perfect time. And I always think jazz drummers had it rougher than anyone else, just because they were the ones that had so little to work with and had to get it so right. I think it's much harder to keep time on a slow song than on a fast song. I think it's much harder to be an understated drummer than an overstated drummer. So, I look at someone like a Stuart Copeland from the Police, and that's why I think Stuart is so good. And Billy, when he was just playing by himself, had a lot of that. It was very much an understated role.
And Charlie Watts too, for that matter, also had some really good chops like that. And yeah, no, just exceptional drummers, all of them. And again, not to slam Mickey and anything like that, but this is just that period of time when Mickey was taking his time off to do whatever he needed to do up on his ranch, and it gave Bill a very unique opportunity to really shine, especially as they made this transition into more traditional music and away from the kind of really wild and crazy psychedelic stuff that we were getting in 68 and 69.
For sure. So what else we got going on? There's a lot happening in the cannabis world this week. I mean, obviously we've seen, new legalization movements. Texas is now moving municipality by municipality to try to decriminalize. We're seeing a bit of that. We're seeing, obviously Rhode Island just, passed cannabis into law, as we talked about previously. But we're getting some some new glimmers of hope, I think, coming out of North Carolina right now on the medicinal side. I don't know if you've been following that at all.
Look, yes, and North Carolina is a state that's been kicked around from time to time because North Carolina, is certainly not unlike other southern states in that it is a southern state, and I think it has a lot of emphasis on that, but it's got a lot of great college campuses down there, and I think that people recognize, maybe even more importantly, that marijuana doesn't have to be competition with tobacco, and that maybe if you see it more as competition with alcohol or something. But look, either way, it's great to see a southern red state like North Carolina, and when I say red, again, it's not as red as some of the others, but predominantly any state that can give us Madison Cawthorn has to be red. So, but I think it's great. I would love to see North Carolina get medical cannabis, and hopefully soon thereafter, get adult use. It would certainly make going to a game in Chapel Hill or Durham a hell of a lot more fun.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And one thing I'll say is that, it's still a relatively conservative state, but in the Senate in North Carolina, certainly, in the state house is very conservative. This sailed through the committee hearing. This sailed through on a voice vote in the Rules and Operations Committee. So, now it's actually going to a full floor vote in the Senate. But the fact it passed in a voice vote out of committee, I think kind of tells you everything that we expect to see going on to the Senate floor. So for this thing to fail, I'd be very, very surprised. But then the question is, what happens if it passes? I mean, look at Virginia, where Virginia's, sort of vacillated back and forth. And, can you actually trust what the passage of the law is going to be? I mean, look at South Dakota with Kristi Noem. Like, it's like the will of the voter or the will of the legislature oftentimes is perverted by the people that have the ultimate say in rulemaking. So, sometimes we're overly excited about the change in law, only to find out. I mean, Florida's another prime example of how it's been walked back, and it was walked back obviously to the benefit of the 17 or so groups that had licenses. But if you think of the way John Morgan crafted that bill and crafted that law, it was meant to be a very, very expansive law in Florida. So I don't know if I always trust it. I think there's a little bit of lying and cheating going on with these guys.
Well, I think that you're right about that, and it's one of those situations where we'll find out if somebody's really willing to come out and be straight with us. But once again, Rob, your timing is impeccable because, as you suggest, kind of creates a perfect lead-in to our final clip of the day, which we'll spin here in a minute on our way out the door. And the tune that you picked for us is "Next Time You See Me." It's a great tune that Jerry sang from time to time, and unfortunately, not nearly often enough. It's a fun tune to have, right? Because it's basically telling somebody, screw you, I tried to do things your way for so long, and I'm not going to do it that way anymore. And that's what we've been talking about the marijuana industry today, right? That we've reached a point where I think everybody's pushing ahead. The MSOs are saying screw 280E, and we're getting a lot of pushback. States are voting for it. And I think that we're seeing that, that huge pushback. And, you can easily say to somebody, next time you come to Illinois, the next time you come to North Carolina, the next time you come anywhere, it ain't going to be the same.
No doubt. And the thing I love about Next Time You See Me is sort of the interplay between Pig's harp and Garcia's guitar. And it's one of the purest forms of like real Garcia blues from that era. And if you think about like how the band probably would have evolved if Pigpen had stayed alive, and you think about kind of the trajectory they were taking as a blues band, Next Time You See Me, I think, is a really good representation of what we would have seen in 72, 73, 74, as they kind of were going through a quasi-Americana / blues combination and away from the sort of the psychedelic side that the Grateful Dead were at. But, people forget that Pig was, well before John Popper, like when Dylan was, the guy blowing the harp. Pig was as good as anyone out there on the harp, and it was always a lot of fun to listen to. So, as we're listening to it going out the door, I picked a little bit that's the pure interplay between Garcia and Pig, going back and forth with, guitar licks and harp licks. But as usual, a really fun episode, and looking forward to next week, and looking forward to some guests we've got lined up for our audience here over the next couple of weeks. But until then, have a great week, Larry, and thanks to Dan Humiston, our host. But Rob Hunt signing off until next week.
Thank you, Rob. A pleasure as always. So, yes, to everyone, I'm not sure if I will be here next week. I'm going to be traveling. I'm going to find myself in the Grand Canyon at the time of taping. So we'll see what modern amenities exist down in that part of the world and whether I can join in. If not, I will be back a week later. And as always, ready to dive in and discuss the issues of the day as they were with marijuana and Grateful Dead and all sorts of other good stuff. So to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us. Thanks to Rob. Thanks to Dan. Have a great week or two. Be safe. Be careful. Enjoy your cannabis responsibly and enjoy the Grateful Dead.
Cheated. Whoa, for so long. Where you lied, cheated. Whoa, for so long. You were wrong, you were wrong, but and I know the queen was on your throne.
Hi, my name's Kate, and I'm your host of the Pop Moms Podcast. I started the Pop Moms Podcast, well, because I wanted to end the stigma against using cannabis, specifically with moms, but also anyone who chooses to consume. I strive for a balance of humor and education, along with some pretty rad guests, to help combat social biases that come with consuming cannabis. Kids are hard. Join me for regular podcast episodes packed with parenting hacks, real-life stories, and of course, my favorite cannabis products. The days are long, but the years are short. So roll another J and take a deep breath. Keep blazing and stay amazing.